Welcome, welcome. We've got slides for you to read off of. Not this first song, of course. It's a nice little something we were thinking about when we're talking about being happy and don't worry and being like children and playful. And so we came up, we thought about this song that I think I heard probably once or twice in my life. Haven't heard since, but it was catchy. Listen for your name. I had like 50 verses, and I was trying to get to everyone in the church, and I'm just like, I can't get to everyone because the song will be 20 minutes long, and there's so much to say about everything and everyone. And then I don't memorize lyrics very well. I don't know lyrics well, so I'm the ooh-ah person up here. So here's a song that someone wrote. You don't have to sing it note for note, so don't you worry. Be happy. 'Cause in your life you have some trouble. 'Cause when you worry you make it double. Don't you worry. Be happy. Ain't got a place to lay your head. Rocky Creek will have a bed, so don't you worry. Ain't that right, Miss Karen? Be happy. Don't have food to last all week. Our soup suppers are always free. Don't you worry. Ain't that right, Alice? Be happy. Together. Don't worry. Just be happy. Sorry, having trouble hearing my monitor. Don't worry. Be happy. Ain't got no job to pass the time. Hit up Wayne, he on keen sign, so don't you worry. I may need a job, like be happy. Don't have a car to drive around. Mary Murphy is in our, there's an Uber or taxi. Mary will help you out. Be happy. You got a cough and it won't quit. Go see David, he'll write you a script, and don't you worry. And then Morgan will fill it for you. Be happy. Our church family is filled with love. Our differences, it makes us one, so don't you worry. Everyone belongs, right? Be happy. Don't you worry. Be happy. That's my serious chord right there. Don't worry. Be happy. That minor made it a church song. Yes, like all the pop songs out there. Contemporary. All right, so we're going to get serious, as if that wasn't a serious song. Because we love you. We have a lot to offer at this church, right? Everyone's important, everyone's special, so. Great is the rod. You give life, you are love, you bring light to the darkness, you give hope, you restore every heart that is broken. Great are you, Lord. Let's do that verse one more time, guys. You give life, you are love, you bring light to you give hope, you restore every heart that is broken. Great are you, Lord, 'cause it's your breath in our lungs, so we pour out our praise, pour out our praise. It's your breath in our lungs, so we pour out our praise to you. You give light, you are love, you bring light to darkness, you give hope, you restore every heart that is broken. Great are you, Lord, 'cause it's your breath in our lives. 'cause it's your breath in our lungs. So we pour out our praise, pour out our praise. It's your breath in our lungs. So we pour out our praise to you only. Great are you. 'Cause you give love, you give love, you give light to the darkness. We'll have our opening prayer this time.
Don't worry, be happy. I just wish you'd had the lyrics up there. As I was thinking about what I was going to say this morning, I'd already decided on this earlier, but this is the day that the Lord has made. Let us rejoice and be glad in it. Which is pretty much the same thing as, don't worry, be happy. You know, we've all got cares and woes and troubles. But don't worry, be happy. God's got it. Bow with me, please. Good morning, Father. Help us to don't worry. And help us to always be happy when we think of you and your love for us, your provision for us, the way you take care of us, just like a father. The perfect example of what a father should be. Lord, we've got something special. Give us the boldness and the courage to share it, because there's an awful lot of hurting people out there that worry and aren't happy because they don't know you. So your charge to us has been to spread that joy and that love. So help us do it, Lord. But we've gathered here this morning as a loving family to bow down before you, Father, to worship you, to sing your praises, and bask in your love. So pour your Spirit upon us, Lord, in Jesus' name. Amen.
I am chosen.
will have our offering at this time. Wait, yes, that's correct. Perfect. Okay. I'm sorry. Yes, offering at this time. I got worried for a moment because I said offering, and then Leslie went, and I went, okay, we're not supposed to have the offering.
Don't worry, be happy.
And don't worry, be happy, right? Don't fret, don't fright. So sorry. I introduced this song probably on Easter Sunday. You guys remember Easter Sunday way back when? Long, long time ago? Okay. So you should remember the song then if you remember Easter Sunday. By your spirit I will rise from the ashes of defeat. The resurrected King is resurrecting me. In your name I come alive to declare your victory. The resurrected King. Let's do that again. By your spirit my thank you. To the ashes of defeat. The resurrected King. Let me hear you guys. Cause your name is victory. All praise will rise to Christ our King. Cause your name, his name, guys, his name is victory. All praise will rise to, one more time with that chorus. Your name is victory. All praise will rise to Christ our King. Your name is victory. All praise will rise to Christ our King. By your spirit I will rise from the ashes of defeat. The resurrected King is resurrecting me. In your name I come alive to declare your victory. The resurrected King. One more time. Resurrecting me. By your spirit I will rise from the ashes of defeat. The resurrected King is resurrecting me. 'Cause in your name I come alive to declare your victory. The resurrected King is resurrecting me. The resurrected King has resurrected me. The resurrected King has resurrected me. The resurrected King has resurrected me.
Well, I have that elementary class is Miss Diane Benton. You can follow her out the back to the building beside us. If you're going to the teen class, that's Miss Alice Goodman. They'll be meeting in this classroom right here. And I have that Mary Murphy has the nursery, so if you have small children, find Mary Murphy. I almost called her Mercery, which is weird. If you'd like to follow along with the sermon on your phone or tablet, you can do so by opening the YouVersion Bible app, going to events in the menu, going to North Augusta Church. Those are our notes. I heard Jerry Seinfeld point to a statistic one time. He said that there was this survey that was done about people's fears. And he said the fascinating thing is that the number one fear that people listed was public speaking. He said number two was death. So he said that means that at any given funeral, most people would prefer to be the person in the box than the person up giving the eulogy. That's fascinating to me. It seems that we tend to be afraid of the wrong things. It's a growing conviction that I have. It's one that I have when I look in my own life. It's one that I have when I look around. It's one that I have when I look at the church. We tend to be afraid of the wrong things. So What I'm going to do today is I'm going to show you a story from the Bible that I think illustrates this, and then I'm going to go through about 4 different ways that I think we tend to be afraid of the wrong things. Certainly, you could come up with more. I'm going to do 4 because you have other things to do with your day too. I mean, we could go on, but that may be one of the things you're afraid of. Actually, that'll never stop. So I'm telling you 4 things, and then we're going to stop. And then at lunch, maybe you could talk about some other things that you came up with. But 4 things, that's what we're going to do. And we're going to talk briefly on each of those things about how those fears tend to be misplaced or misdirected. Let's start with a passage. You can turn to Acts chapter 9, and we'll start in verse 10. Acts chapter 9, we'll start in verse 10. In Damascus, there was a disciple named Ananias. The Lord called to him in a vision, "Ananias." "Yes, Lord," he answered. The Lord told him, "Go to the house of Judas on Straight Street and ask for a man from Tarsus named Saul, for he is praying. In a vision, he has seen a man named Ananias come and place his hands on him to restore his sight." "Lord," Ananias answered, "I have heard many reports about this man and all the harm that he has done to your holy people in Jerusalem, and he has come here on authority from the chief priest to arrest all who call on your name." But the Lord said to Ananias, "Go. This man is my chosen instrument to proclaim my name to the Gentiles and their kings and to the people of Israel. I will show him how much he must suffer for my name." Now, I actually love this story. This story comes at a point in Acts, and you know some things if you paid attention to the Bible. You know that this Saul is the Saul who eventually becomes Paul, who writes most of the New Testament, who's responsible for spreading the gospel in just sort of a huge way in that part of the world. But at this point, he is Saul. Saul, who is a very, very zealous Pharisee, and by zealous I mean he really, really wants to shut down Christianity. To the point that it's not that he's recruited by the chief priests, it's that he goes to them and says, "Guys, I would really like it if you would give me authority to hunt down Christians so that we could throw them in prison." And they grant him that authority, but it's because he sought it, not because he was recruited. He's that into it, okay? So he has this experience on the road to Damascus. He is struck blind. Jesus interacts with him after the resurrection, and he's having this sort of about face, but here he's in the middle of it. Now, that's happened, and there's this disciple named Ananias. Confusingly enough, there are 2 people in the Bible named Ananias. They're both in Acts, and they're as different as they could be. This is not the other one. This is this one. And so, glad I could clear that up for you. That's what you pay me for. So I actually love the way this is written. It almost reads like a comedy sketch to me. You have Ananias is sitting around, and the Lord calls to Ananias, and then they give you an example of how the Lord would call to Ananias. He says, "Ananias." Ananias goes, "Yes, Lord," instantly recognizes his voice. And the Lord says, Ananias, there's this guy named Saul. He's been praying. He gives him the address. It's Judas' house on Straight Street. And I need you to go and because I told him that a guy named Ananias is coming, and he's going to put his hands on him, and he'll get his sight back, and he's there praying. And Ananias goes, if you'll allow me to paraphrase, okay, there's a guy named Saul who been going around persecuting Christians and throwing them in prison, got special permission from the chief priest. You mean that's Saul? Yeah, that's the guy. And you told him my name? Well, there's at least 2 Ananiases in town, so maybe. But yeah, God says, yeah, that's the guy. That's the guy. I want you to go. You're not confused. Here's the thing. I love that this story at least shows Ananias' hesitation. I love that it shows him stop and at least get God to clarify, to make sure he wasn't misunderstanding. Because here's the thing. Ananias is right. He's not mistaken. It is that Saul. And that Saul isn't just misunderstood. His assumptions about Saul to that point are correct. As far as I can tell, Saul's not even fully through a conversion process. He's kind of in the middle of it, figuring stuff out. Ananias isn't wrong. Ananias has reason to be afraid of Saul. You get that? God doesn't say, no, different guy, you're confused. Right guy. Currently there, because he got special permission to hunt down Christians, God told him his name. This guy named Ananias is coming. He's going to put his hands on you. So you go and tell him you're Ananias. He's not wrong. His facts are accurate. But here's kind of the card that I'm going to show that's sort of the theme that underlies everything else I want to talk about. Thank God that Ananias didn't let his facts get in the way of the truth. Because the truth was, while all those facts were accurate, the truth is that this Saul is going to become Paul, who God uses to spread the gospel in a massive way, geographically more than it had been spread before. This Saul is going to become Paul, who writes the majority of the New Testament that you now hold. That's the truth of what God's going to do through this person who Ananias has his facts right about. You understand what I'm saying? He's not wrong. He has reason to be afraid given the facts that are on the ground right there. I love that he actually even expresses it to God to make sure that he's not mistaken. You mean that Saul? Yeah, that's the guy. I told him you were coming. He didn't let his fears dictate what he did. It's a point that I always hesitate a little bit to point out because it sounds so sort of hokey and canned, but it's also true. That if you looked in the Bible for the most common command that's given in the Bible, the reason it sounds hokey and canned is because it actually comes up 365 times, which sounds like something that was designed for a thought of the day calendar or something. But it's 365 times in the Bible, there's some version of the command, do not be afraid. It is the most common command given in the Bible. And the reason is because fear, especially that sort of fear that you feed, fear that you give into, is antithetical to faith. You understand? If it's the voice that you listen to, if it's the thing that you allow to stop you from taking action, then you're never really doing the faithful thing. And understand, I'm not saying that you never feel afraid. You're going to feel afraid. The idea, one of the more unhelpful ideas that's been out there is the idea that somehow you being courageous or brave is you cultivating yourself so that you never experience the feeling of fear. That is false. Courage, bravery, frankly, faith, is being able to step forward into it even though you feel afraid. The person who never feels fear, that's not necessarily a brave person. They're actually not doing anything impressive. You get that, right? That could just be a sociopath. Person who just never experiences that could just be dysfunction. The person who's brave is the person who is nervous, who's afraid, who's anxious, and who's able to step into it anyway because it matters and it's important. The person who's willing to take the risk for things that are bigger, that are good. So let's walk through 4 areas where I think this is true, and certainly you can play out some more. Number 1, when I look around, I think we tend to be afraid of commitment, or commitments, if that helps you sort of locate what I'm talking about here. When we should be concerned about losing our identity. Let me explain what I mean. If I go the entire rest of my life without hearing someone saying that they're taking some time off to find themselves, I will be pretty happy. And because when somebody says that to me, I'm taking some time to find myself. I really have no control over the impulse of my eyes rolling, and it never comes across very well, and I don't want to strain those muscles. Here's the problem. When somebody says I'm taking some time off to find myself, what they tend to mean is I'm freeing myself from all commitments so that I can sit around and think about it. And then when I've thought about it enough, I'll figure out who I am. Here's the problem with that. If you look into pretty much everything that psychology and sociology and social sciences are saying right now, like if you just, okay, I'm not even trying to convince you with Scripture anymore, but you look at what the sciences that are actually studying this kind of thing say. What they're saying fairly consistently and fairly definitively is this: your identity is made up of your commitments, your values, your relationships, etc. That who you are as a person is composed of what you've said, yes, this matters, I'm committed to this, I'm devoted to this, these are the ideas that matter, these are the relationships that matter, here are the things that I'm going to stand on. The places where you make commitments, they compose your identity. And so the idea of, well, I'm just going to throw everything off and find myself, and then I'll figure out what commit. Okay, that's not only counterproductive, it's ridiculous if you know anything about how identity actually works. Who you are is made up of what you say yes to. What you choose is good and important and valuable, which has huge ramifications for things like if you just refuse to do that kind of thing and you're just being reactionary to whatever feels urgent, then you're being shaped in certain ways, whether you mean to be or not. Remember what we talked about a few weeks ago? It was on a different subject, but we talked about if I passed out little note cards or something and golf pencils or whatever we're going to do, and I said, okay, write down to me the things that you think are most important in life. I'm convinced you would all come up with great lists. Really good, moving, important lists. I would too. It would be fantastic. But if we then start saying, okay, and I will never do this, if we start saying, okay, so now show me your bank statement and show me what you're doing with your time. How many of us would be super happy about the way those things matched up with our list? Would we say that they reflected it? Or would it stand in contrast? Will we be left sort of sputtering and saying things like, but in a perfect world, that's what in the real world, I have to do. Your identity is made up of the things that you are committed to, the things that you say yes to. And if you're just being reactionary, and let me say, look, I'm not talking from a position talking down to this. I find myself there a lot, where just things that feel urgent are pulling you in all kind of directions, and you know who you want to be, but you wind up starting to become somebody else because you're just pulled there. I heard Tony Campolo one time say, one of the big epidemics that's going on in our society today is we talk about how busy we are, how we're all too busy. Like when we ask how somebody's doing, we start listing off all of the things, how busy we are. And it's like one of the first things we say to people. We want people to be impressed by how busy we are. And Campolo said, the thing is, if you're too busy, it's because you're undercommitted. He says, because if you say yes to a few very important things, you're going to have to say no to some other stuff. If you're too busy, you're undercommitted. I remember when I was a youth minister. It's getting longer and longer ago. It's taking more effort to remember it. But I remember when I was a youth minister, and we would schedule trips. And when you schedule trips like that, you would have to make hotel accommodations, and you would have to buy tickets for things. And to do that, pretty significantly ahead of time, you would have to get people to say, okay, yes, my kid is definitely going on this trip, so you can buy the ticket, you can make the reservation for the hotel room. Most of this stuff, by the way, is non-refundable. And you would not believe, or maybe you would, the effort that it took to say, look, I have to know by this date because I have to book the stuff. And people still wanting you to say, well, put their name on the list and hold a spot for us. No, that's not how things work. I have to pay them this money, and if you don't go, it just evaporates because they still get the money. And how much trouble people had with that because they couldn't commit to, okay, those 3 days, that's what we're doing. And you would say, okay, well, what else do you think you might go on? And they couldn't say. It was like they had to hold it in case something else came up. Instead of just saying, yeah, we're down to that level. And again, I got frustrated about that, but I still feel that. We have trouble saying a definitive yes to things. We have trouble committing to things. And because of that impulse, because of that fear, we find ourselves being pulled in a million different directions and losing who we are and not being able to say yes to the things that we've said are so important. We're afraid of commitment when we should be concerned about losing our identity. Number 2, we're afraid of rejection when we should be concerned about living our lives without meaningful connections. If you were to look at all the one another's of the Bible, every time the Bible has some statement about one another, Christianity necessarily involves community and relationships. If you look at all the places in the Bible where it uses the pronoun you, and you lose this in English, but most of those are actually plural yous. They're talking to communities of people. In general, the Bible doesn't really know or understand the idea of an individual Christian because it makes the assumption that when you come to Jesus, you're connected to other people, you're a part of this bigger group, you're a part of the body of Christ. That's why that's the dominant metaphor. It assumes these connections. We've pointed out before that if you were to look at things like the fruit of the Spirit, whenever you have a list like that, here are the works of the flesh, here's the fruit of the Spirit. The majority of those things, and arguably in a sense all of those things, are relational terms. They have to do with connection and relationship to other people. Now sometimes, if we've been hurt in the past, we begin to try to protect ourselves relationally. We begin to try to keep everything at an acquaintance level, and or we try to reject the other person before they have a chance to reject us. Let me rephrase that just slightly. If you have had actual relationships with other people, then you have been hurt in the past. Relationally. Correct? I mean, you've met people. If you have had relationships and interactions with other people in the past and you've exercised any level of trust or love, you have been hurt in the past. And because of that, sometimes we tend to stop opening up as much I mean, it's like when you damage your skin repeatedly and a callus builds up there because to protect yourself. So we can start to do that relationally. We begin to not be as open, to not be as sensitive, to not be as vulnerable with other people. And I'm not saying you shouldn't use any wisdom in that. You should. But we hold everybody at arm's length because you've never been hurt that much by an acquaintance. And so you hold everybody sort of at acquaintance level. Or we just go ahead and pre-reject others before they have a chance to reject us. The means of protection. Or sometimes, and again, social sciences are really bringing out how much this is true in a way that we weren't really even talking about it before. Sometimes we feel like we're not worthy of connection, like there's something fundamentally unlovable about us. So we either don't pursue meaningful relationships with others, or we present an idealized image of ourselves, which ironically prevents us from true connection because we know that they've only met the image, the mask, the thing that we're presenting, and not the real us. And if they connect with that image that we're presenting, that can actually hurt worse because we think they like that better, and we know that they didn't connect with us. They just connected with what we're putting forward. And so we use ourselves up trying to maintain the facade that people connect with, knowing that they're never connecting with the real us. Brene Brown says, we are psychologically, emotionally, cognitively, and spiritually hardwired for connection, love, and belonging. Connection, along with love and belonging, which is two expressions of connection, is why we are here. And it is what gives purpose and meaning to our lives. Shame is the fear of disconnection. It's the fear that something we've done or failed to do, an ideal that we've not lived up to, or a goal that we've not accomplished, makes us unworthy of connection. Human beings are relational beings, and I don't care how introverted or extroverted you are, there is a sense in which we find meaning, we find joy, it's all found in connection. That doesn't mean some of you have to rest up more after being social. That's fine. That's not what I'm talking about. But the idea that you would be just fine and joyful and happy and content, disconnected from everybody else, is a fallacy. It is a provable fallacy. It'll actually kill you. But because we've been damaged, because we've been hurt, because we're so saturated by shame and we're holding up these facades, and frankly, social media has even driven that further because it gives you such a great mechanism to be able to create this tailor-made image to hold up to people. We seem to be more and more and more losing our ability to make those kind of connections. We keep trying to substitute this more shallow imitation for actual connection. We try to protect ourselves and shield ourselves from it to avoid getting hurt, even though that move robs us of the very things that we're trying to protect. Let me tell you a story about how I ended up preaching on this week. Because I actually had like 2 other things written and scrapped them. Last week, Dana and I wound up in a conversation with Greg Bean. And in it, the conversation went all over the place. So I don't want you to think that it was this like funneled, focused kind of thing. But in it, we were talking about faith, and Greg asked, what do you think, in terms of faith, what do you think is something that we could do or you could do or we as a church could do that would actually be risky? And then he came back later and he said, let me rephrase that a little bit. Maybe this gets at what I'm saying. He said, what do you think that we could do that would really stretch our faith? And, you ask the clarifying questions. Do you mean individually or do you mean to as a church? And he basically said, yeah. And so Dana and I went home, and we were thinking about it. And then Dana comes to me. I'll give you a little bit of backstory, too, before I tell you what she told me. A few months ago, I don't know if you've noticed, there's a church across the street. It's the Southern Methodist Church. A few months ago, through the office, we got a request from them. Their pastor of about 30 years had passed away. And they said, we're going to have a memorial service. Would it be possible for us to use your parking lot? Because we're expecting. Absolutely. We didn't think about that. Of course, you can use our parking lot. And then Magali and I talked, and we decided that we would send flowers and we would send a note, because they're our neighbors. And, so we sent that, and we didn't really think a whole lot else about it. And then one Sunday after the memorial service, this guy comes over, and he's wearing a suit, and Dana's one of the people that happens to be out there, and she's like, oh, no, we've got to find a map and send him to the other church because this is a guy in a suit. He is not going to like it here. But it turns out that he was actually from the church across the street. And he said, I just wanted to let you guys know that we got your flowers and we got your note, and it really meant a lot to us in this time that you guys cared about that. That was it. I mean, he walked back across the street. So fast forward to our conversation with Greg, and then Dana and I being at home later, and Dana comes up to me and she says, you know what keeps coming to my mind when I think about Greg's question? She said, I keep thinking about that church across the street, and they're our neighbors. And I think we need to reach out to them, not to try to convert them, not to try to, they love Jesus, we love Jesus, that's a lot in common, and we're both these smaller churches in the shadow of great big ones, and, it just seems like I think that's what God's telling me to do, to reach out to them. And after getting over the fact that I didn't come up with the idea first, I said, all right, let's think about what we can do there. And I was coming up with things like, okay, I'll ask the pastor to lunch, and and Dana goes, no, I looked on their website. They have a Bible study at 10 o'clock a.m. on Wednesdays, and I'm going to go over there. And I said, all right, I'm going to go with you. And partially that's because I didn't want her to go in and say, well, I'm the minister's wife, but he's sitting his tail over there in his office and across the street. And partially because I really did, the more that I thought about it, the more I thought, I've been here 11 years. I don't even know anybody over there. And so Dana comes over here, and then we go over there. Walk in. I was like, I'm going to get an actual Bible and not just taking the iPad, because I don't know these people. And we go in, and that guy, it took me a second because he was wearing a T-shirt instead of a suit, but that guy comes back out, and I was like, I'm Adam Ellis. He goes, oh, I know who you are. What's going on? How can I help you? I was like, well, I can't remember who said this actually, whether it was me or Dana. But she said, well, you're our neighbors, and we noticed that you had a Bible study, and thought we'd come. And they seemed slightly confused by that. But welcomed us. He brought us in. He introduced us to the other people there. It's certainly, when you go to a Bible study at 10 o'clock at a church building, 10 a.m. on a weekday, there's definitely a demographic. And we felt young. Matter of fact, if you get some free time, it's one of the benefits that you can go and just feel like, man, everything else about life is making me feel old. I got a kid that's a junior in high school, but felt like a kid, man. So we go over, and they're studying Deuteronomy. A lot of it's out of King James Version. But it was, we connected with these people, and we had Jesus in common, and we sit there through where they're talking about the people in their church and the prayer requests. And we prayed. They asked me to pray because that's what happens to me when I go places. And they asked us what was going on with our church, and we told them some things that we were happy about. afterwards, the guy who come across the street talks to me. His name is Steve Jones. And it turns out that he was really good friends with the pastor who had died, that he had been a pastor previously years ago, and that when this gentleman had died, that he had sort of stepped into the role because he was sort of a long-time member there. He's able to do that in a way where it's invested, where it's not some outsider kind of coming in, and he was very close, so there's not even a competitive kind of thing. But he never anticipated that he would be doing this kind of thing again at this point. And we've been talking. His wife, whose name is Kathy, went up to Dana while I was talking to him and just connected with her over being a minister's wife. And they had a really good conversation that you just don't run into without having that kind of commonality. We talked about some possibilities for even our two churches collaborating. None of that's set in stone yet, but it's an interesting possibility. He sent a message the same day thanking me for us coming over. I didn't say, well, it was really Dana's idea. But it was. We've actually talked several times since then. Now, am I going to tell you, and here's this big meaningful thing that I've already found and figured out? No. Here's where I know that's going. No. I don't have any idea where it's going. But do you understand how a whole new world of possibilities and connection opens up? Because you step into something that I'm going to tell you isn't particularly comfortable. Because you actually step outside of your comfort zone. I hate using cliche-sounding phrases, but there's a reason that's a cliche phrase, because we still have to talk about it. The curious thing about staying where you're comfortable all the time is that you never actually grow or learn anything. And you never actually make any new connections, which is where life is found. The thing about staying comfortable and safe is it actually robs you of that very life that you think you're protecting. It sucks it dry of meaning and joy. Am I telling you you don't need to have boundaries? No, have boundaries. Am I telling you that you don't need to be wise about where you're making it? No, absolutely be wise. But don't let pendulum swing reactions rob you from living the life you were actually made to live. Don't let the threat of discomfort rob you of potential and possibility. Number 3. We're afraid of change. And that's true of most people most of the time. It's more true of organizations. Organizations trend towards inertia more than even individuals do. We're afraid of change when we should be concerned about getting stuck where we are. If you study systems theory and psychology or even biology, they have a term for living systems that stop changing. Dead. Living systems, in order to be alive and functioning, they are constantly in flux. They're constantly changing. That's the nature of a living system. It's also true in languages. You know why we talk about Latin as a dead language? It's because it's fixed. It doesn't change anymore. It doesn't change anymore because it's not in use. You know why English is incredibly frustrating and most languages are incredibly frustrating to start learning as an adult? Because they're constantly in flux. You know, our Bible translations have to keep revisiting the translations every few years and make tweaks to it? Because the language moves. And if you want to keep it saying the same thing with a moving, living language, then you have to tweak that because words start to mean different things. Living systems change constantly. When they stop, they're dead. Christianity, in a very real sense, is change. It is transformation. Committing yourself to the way of Jesus, committing yourself to Christianity is, in a very real sense, committing yourself to change and transformation for the rest of your life. Let me rephrase that. Committing yourself to the way of Jesus, committing yourself to Christianity is committing yourself to change and transformation every day for the rest of your life. Think that's too strong a statement? How many of you have arrived at being fully formed into the image of Christ? Got the attitude of Christ thing down? You've got, no? I'm always a little nervous there. Ask that question. It would be really, really awkward if that goes south on me one day. No, you're not there. And the idea is that God is going to be working on you, that the Holy Spirit is going to be producing these fruit in your life every day that you're staying in step with it. So that means that for the rest of your life, you're going to be learning more about God because the 3-pound brain you've got in your head and the infinite God, there's a gap. But God says, draw near to me and I'll draw near to you. That you're learning, but you're going to be learning. You don't have it figured out. Your character is constantly being transformed into the image of Christ. You are clothed with Christ. You are given the righteousness as if you were the same as Christ, but you are being formed into that character for the rest of your life. Being that you haven't arrived, being that I haven't arrived, we are going to be being transformed for the rest of our lives. All of that means that some of the things that you are really convinced of right now that you get real worked up about, you're wrong about, and so am I. Some of the things that you feel really strongly about, and some of the things that I feel really strong about, we're wrong about. We have to be. Or we're at least uninformed or ignorant about it. We have to be. Being that we're not God, and just checking, still not? Okay. Being that we're not God, for the rest of our life, we're going to be learning, we're going to be growing, we're going to be maturing, meaning we're not there now. Meaning that just sort of hanging on and defending where I am is not what you're called to. And not what I'm called to. It is not the path of discipleship. Discipleship means I'm being shaped and molded into the image of Christ for the rest of my life. Commitment to Christianity is commitment to change and transformation for the rest of our lives for all of us. The term for a living system that stops changing is dead. The term for a living church that stops changing is dead. The term for spirituality that stops changing is dead. And we want to be truly alive and growing as individuals, as families, and as a church. And that means that it's not about locking things down. It's about being open to the wind of the Spirit that will propel us forward into love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, and self-control. That will propel us forward into places where we are not already. It is not about capturing some kind of nostalgia from the past. It is not about maintaining things just the way that they are. It's about growing and moving into God's future. We're afraid of change when the thing we actually ought to be concerned about is getting stuck. And finally, we're afraid of death. And I'll go so far as saying we're afraid of death, we're afraid of pain, we're afraid of discomfort, when we should be concerned about never really living. We're afraid of dying, we're afraid of even giving hurt. And in our culture today, and this is well documented, but you don't even need me to show you the documentation because you know this is true, we have a tendency to escape into our bottles, some of which contain alcohol, some of which contain pills. Or we escape into our screens these days, whether they're in our living room or whether we carry them around in our pocket. We don't take risks. We don't like to be stretched. We're afraid of what we might lose. There's an interesting book written by two brothers named Ori and Ram Brofman. The book is called Sway. It's not a particularly religious book. But their basic premise is this, that when individuals or particularly organizations, that when they start to make decisions based on avoiding loss, that they make the most irrational decisions they will ever make. And those decisions normally cost them whatever it is that they were trying to protect. They do a fantastic job of proving it. But you know that's true. You've seen it. It's really easy to identify when other people are doing it, by the way. It makes all the sense in the world when you're doing it, even though it literally never works. Part of the thing that brought up the conversation with Greg the other day is he mentioned a sermon that I had done a while back, which is always nice, by the way, when somebody remembers something from a sermon that you did. He talked about my take on the parable of the talents. I won't do the whole sermon here, obviously, but the gist is that, number one, the word talents, when Jesus uses it, is not our word talents. We kind of derive our meaning from his use of it. At the time, it basically was a unit of money, possibly weight, but normally associated with money, and it had to do with sort of bags of gold, if that helps you understand the parable. And so there's this wealthy landowner who calls some of the people who work for him together, and he's like, all right, I'm going to give you guys this many bags of gold, this many bags of gold, and I'll give you like one bag of gold. And he goes away for a while, and they're supposed to manage it for him. When he gets back, the first two guys have invested his money in something. And by the way, that was the only instruction he gave them. Here's my money, I'm going to be gone for a while, manage it, take care of it, see you when I get back. He gets back, the first two guys have invested the money, and they've invested in something so risky that just in the time that he's been gone on this trip, they're able to double the investment. Not a lot of, again, I'm not a mathologist, but there's not a lot of investment. In order for something to turn double, it's got to be a fairly risky investment. I know that much, which is why most of us aren't doubling our money every day. The third guy is interesting, because here's what the third guy does. I'm really scared of him, and I don't want him to show back up here and me have to say, I lost your money. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to bury it in my backyard, and when he comes back, I'll know exactly where it is, and I'll be able to give him back exactly what he trusted me with. Have to be a good steward. So, landowner comes back. First two guys go, we doubled your money. He goes, well, that's great. Now, it's not surprising that he's excited about having more money, by the way. Of course he's excited about that. But it implies that they did something so risky that it doubled the money. So he goes, I'll tell you what, I'm going to trust you with even more. He gives both of them more money than he gave them to start with. The third guy comes back and he says, sir, I knew that you were, and if you'll allow me to paraphrase, kind of a mean, powerful jerk. Story doesn't verify that, by the way. That's that guy's impression. The other two guys didn't think that, obviously, or they wouldn't have done such a risky investment. But that's this guy's impression. I'm afraid of you. I was afraid of presenting you, of not having what you gave me to give back to you. And so here it is, exactly what you gave me to take care of. I didn't lose any of it. And he says, you wicked, unfaithful servant. Take what he has and give it to them. The water gets muddy when we apply our meaning of the word talent onto that story because we miss what kind of the real thrust of it is. The real thrust of the story is, if you're asking Jesus the question, isn't it better to be safe? His answer is a definitive no. There is one safe character in that story, and he doesn't wind up being the hero of it. Now, invariably, after I talk about this parable, somebody tends to come up to me. You probably won't now since I'm saying this part, but up to this point, somebody would come up to me and say, I get what you're saying. This is not an impression of an actual person, by the way. Don't listen to people and see if it sounds like their voice. I get what you're saying, but I just wish Jesus had made one of those first guys lose the money. And yeah, from a storytelling standpoint, it's frustrating until you realize that it's brilliant. From a storytelling standpoint, you've got three characters, and you have the same thing happen to two of them. And the opposite happened to the third. You have a hypothetical condition that never gets met. That's wasting a character. Right? You've got three potential scenarios, you've got three characters, and you waste one of them on the same situation as the first one. Where it becomes brilliant is when you realize that if Jesus had done that with the second character, then he takes all the risk out of it for you. I just need to see some guy lose it all so that I know what happens to that guy. Yeah, that'd be nice to not have to exercise any faith, wouldn't it? If we could just do something in the story that makes it comfortable. It's almost like Jesus knew what he was doing. See, there is no version of faith that doesn't involve risk. There's no version of faith that's comfortable. There's no version of faith that is a matter of you just staying like you are and not reaching out and not making connections. There's no version of that. There is no safe faith. Now, somebody's going to come back to me and say, and they may still come back to me and say on this one, well, yeah, but if you understand who God really is and that he's not going to let any of us fall, then you understand that big picture, it is safe. Sure, and one day in eternity you'll be able to look back and say that, but you don't have access to that right now. Now you're in that middle part where you have to trust, and there is no version of faith that doesn't involve trust. Faith is what we have in the middle. That's why the Bible talks about that there will be a day when there is no more hope and there is no more faith, because we will see as we are and we will know as we are known. There'll be no reason for it at that point, but you live here. And that involves trusting. It involves hoping. It involves believing in. I haven't seen it in years, but one of my favorite movies is Braveheart. And I think the moment it became one of my favorite movies is where William Wallace, completely historically inaccurately, by the way, but where William Wallace drops the line, every man dies, but not every man really lives. It's one of those that just echoes to you unbidden sometimes, you know? But maybe you need this reminder. John chapter 10, verse 10, Jesus says, the thief comes only to steal and kill and destroy. But I have come that they might have life and have it to the full. The person you're trusting in is Jesus. Jesus is not trying to trip you up. He's not trying to say, okay, you trust me, and either it's going to work out for you or we're setting you up, and me and the angels are just going to think it's hilarious. He goes, look, you can trust the thief who wants to steal it from you. He's an agent of fear. Or you can trust me who came that you could have life, and not just life, but life to the full, life overflowing, life and more life without end. Jesus wants to give you, as his follower, one of the most full lives possible, but it involves you serving other people. It involves you connecting with other people. It involves you trusting. It involves you stepping out with faith. And there is no version of it that doesn't involve that. It involves discomfort. But you just can't get to that life to the full without going through that. And if you try to continually protect yourself from it, you will never get there. So, may you overcome your fear of commitments, and in so doing, may you find your true self. May you quit selling yourself and others short through preemptive rejections, and may you find the meaningful connection you were meant to have in your life. May you embrace change, knowing that by doing so, you're embracing the potential for growth, learning, the future, and countless possibilities you've not yet dared to imagine. And as those who believe in the resurrected Christ, may you be set free from your fear of death so that you can truly live life to the fullest. And may the God of hope fill you with all joy and peace as you trust in him, so that you may overflow with hope by the power of the Holy Spirit. Church, sit together. Amen.
Pray with me, please. Father, thank you for your Son. Thank you for coming to the earth, for living the life that he lived, the example for us, the love for us. Thank you for his sacrifice on the cross, his body and his blood that was shed. And please draw our minds back there. This is our prayer in his name. Amen.
and so are you. We build walls nobody can get through. Yeah, it may be hard, but the best thing we could ever do. Bring your brokenness and I'll bring mine. Love can heal what hurt divides. Mercy's waiting on the other side. When we're honest, don't pretend to be something that you're not. Living life afraid of getting caught. There is freedom found when we lay our secrets down at the cross. At the cross. Bring your brokenness and I'll bring mine. Love can feel what hurt divides. Mercy's waiting on the other side. When we're honest, if we're honest, it would change our life. It would set us free. It's what we need to be. Bring your brokenness and I'll bring mine. Love can heal what hurt divides. Mercy's waiting on the other side. If we're honest, if we're
I think I used up just about every bit of my voice with that sermon. So, for the last little bit, I'll make very brief announcements. Number one, we've got lunch. Stay for it. It'll be great. Number two, October 21st, we're doing the Meal at the Rescue Mission. If you'd like to be a part of that, that's a Monday evening. Touch base with me or the Namolas, and we'll make sure that you know where to be and what to do. Other than that, if there is nothing else, then the worship team's chosen a video they want to show you. It's a brief video, and then they'll close us out with a song afterwards. So.
child of God. 'Cause I'm no longer a slave to fear. 'Cause I am a child of God. You unravel me. 'Cause you unravel me with the melody. You surround me with a song of deliverance from my enemies, till all my fears are gone. 'Cause I'm no longer a slave to fear. 'Cause I am a child of God. 'Cause I'm no longer a slave to fear. 'Cause I am a child of God. From my mother's womb, you have chosen me. Your love has called my name. 'Cause I've been born again to your family. Your blood flows through my veins. One more time. 'Cause from my mother's womb, he has chosen you. You have chosen me. Your love has called my name. 'Cause I've been born again to this family. Your blood flows through my veins. 'Cause I'm no longer a slave to fear. For I am a child of God. 'Cause I'm no longer a slave to fear. For I am a child of God. We're going to do that bridge 3 times. The first couple of times you're going to do it with instrumentals. That third one, I want it to be a chant. So we're going to use our voices, guys. You split the sea. 'Cause you split the sea where I could walk right through it. 'Cause my fears will drown in your perfect love. 'Cause you rescued me so I can stand and sing. 'Cause I am a child of God. This is number 2. Come on. 'Cause you split the sea so I could walk right through it. My fears will drown in your perfect. 'Cause you rescued me so I can stand and sing. 'Cause I am a child of God. Let's use our voices, come on. 'Cause you split the sea so I could walk right through it. 'Cause my fears will drown in your perfect love. 'Cause you rescued me so I can stand and sing. 'Cause I am a child of God. 'Cause yes, I am a child of God. 'Cause yes, I am a child of God. Because we're children of God, right? We're no longer a slave to fear. For I am a child of God. There's my identity right there. I'm no longer a slave to fear. For I am a child